Lovely warm welcome, and because I'm a native Welsh speaker, I like to say prynawn da as well, which is Welsh for good afternoon, and I'm also learning Gaelic, so I think it's Fesca Va if I'm correct. So welcome as well, Gerald, to today's first Sharing Space event, which we're really excited to have you along for. But before you start talking, I might just share with people a little bit of a background on how you and I met. So Gerald moved from America to Scotland 5 years ago to start a new role as the CEO of the Superpower Agency. And it was back then I had the opportunity to meet Gerald and to discuss a potential partnership where I could potentially commission contemporary craft makers through my other job at Craft Scotland to work alongside some of the young people that Gerald and his team work with through the agency. So I had the amazing opportunity to commission a local bookmaker and illustrator called Lucy Roscoe, who also teaches at Edinburgh College of Art. And she went along and worked with some of the primary school aged pupils at some local schools in the Leith area of Edinburgh, and she helped them develop a visual element to the stories that they were creating based on a project called Seven Spaceships. And she really helped them to create these sort of gigantic pop-up books that was as long as a classroom and as tall as a young person. I've also worked with Gerald in other capacities as well. I've volunteered a few times, worked with other artists and see how they engage with young people. But I've also observed Gerald giving some fantastic presentations at the National Library of Scotland, where they've had young people go along and present some of the books that they've published, which now sit in the National Collection. But the thing that really resonates with me is my very first conversation with Gerald, where he was telling me about the type of young people that they've been engaging with. And they directly target young people who are around about age 14, who are disengaged from the education system. So those who don't have the basic reading and writing skills. So what I'd like you to do, Gerald, is just to start off by telling us a little bit more about your journey over the last 5 years at the agency, and sort of maybe expand on the model that you use and how do you engage with young people and get them to publish books and find that confidence to talk publicly and like that. So I'll hand over, Gerald.
Hi everybody, or howdy from the US saying hi. So I'm glad to be here, and thanks Tan for inviting me. So I guess if you start with I came, as Tan said, about 5 years ago. I was the CEO of an organization in the States called 826 National, which is a network of creative writing and after-school tutoring centers located now in the US in about 9 cities. And they work specifically with young people in cities to help them build writing skills, build a love of writing, and then sort of knowing that helps them with their confidence and self-esteem. And the model now has expanded from the US to about 17 other countries. And so at some point, some people here from Edinburgh had always wanted to bring the model to Scotland, and they'd finally sort of gotten together and they came over and they trained with us about, how we do our ethos and how we do what we do. And then about a year later, they invited me to come over to do some training here in Edinburgh about the model and what they were doing, because they wanted to start it up and start up the organization and start working in schools. And I remember that, we had a great training where I was here for about a week. I fell in love with the city. It's great. I think it's beautiful. And the fact that it's such a literary city and the country is such a literary city. Scottish people tell a story like no one else, I will say. Since I've been here, I did a lot of storytelling, and Scottish people tell great stories. But they couldn't find someone to run the organization. So I offered myself up. I was leaving my job, and I said, "Oh, I'll come." I've always wanted to live overseas, and I'd move here and do it. And so that was 5 years ago. And we started working, and our model is pretty much for the Superpower Agency. We bring the creative writing workshops to schools and community-based organizations. And we work with young people. Workshops last anywhere from about 8 to 10 weeks, where we, in essence, embed ourselves in a school, in a classroom. And we go in once a week and work with the young people on different writing projects. And usually they're prompted by sort of, as I like to say, we go in and we talk to the head teachers and the teachers, and we say, what are your hopes and dreams? What would you like us to work on with the kids? And it could be anywhere from just being creative and letting the kids sort of guide what the stories are about, to the teachers might be working on poetry, and so they want to bring poetry to life, and they want it to be they're learning about Walter Scott, but they want people to understand the different facets of poetry and what they could do. Or we just finished up a project, and if anyone watches STV, actually we had there was a story about us on STV. We just finished up a pen pals project. It was an intergenerational pen pals project where S2 pupils were writing to our volunteers and our older volunteers, just for a couple of weeks while they went back and forth with letters. We do projects around identity. I think with the older students that we work with, it's really about how do we get them to talk about themselves and learn about themselves, and to be able to express themselves, or to get to meet other people. And our work is only possible because of a cadre of volunteers like Hanwin, who come in to the classroom with us and sort of bring the community into the school and work with the young people over the course of the 8 weeks. And everything, we publish everything the young people write. So every workshop that we do ends in a book, or a magazine, or some type of publication that we publish that the young people then get a copy of. And we then sell on our website and in local bookstores that will then, those funds then go back into the program, so we can keep our programs free of charge for young people. We do ask schools to help pay for the printing costs, but beyond that, each young person gets a copy or two of the book. And we have a launch party. We try to celebrate them as much as we can and their success in writing. And it's great. So far, we've published by the end of the summer, we'll have published 20 books of youth writing. Anywhere from poetry books to the kids writing children's books, to memoirs, to you name it. We've tried to publish it all. We're about to have a video come out of young people doing slam poetry at one of the schools we work with. And so we've been based in Edinburgh, but we are now starting to slowly, hopefully that will soon be quickly, expand across Scotland. So we are now doing workshops in Dunfermline, in Tullibody, and in Pupils, and hope to expand beyond that. You're on mute.
Sorry, thanks, Gerald.
Okay. No.
Yeah, I know we've had a few conversations leading up to today's chat, and as always, the work that you do is incredible. But I can't imagine that it's been an easy ride either. Could you expand perhaps on some of the challenges around working in partnership with organisations as well as community groups, and how do you agree on the outcomes? And are they, like, I know you mentioned once that you were putting a book together, but someone wanted to write a different story to everybody else. So how do you make sure everyone's voice is heard and no one's left out of a project?
I think it's one of the ways we do that. That's a good question. I think the big one, one of the big challenges we usually have is, I think people have, it's sort of a hard thing to fathom, especially for a young person, that there's going to be a book at the end of this. Mm-hmm. Even when we bring in a book, or we bring in examples of books, like, here, you're going to write this. We bring them in, they look through them, and I think there's still this moment where they're like, yeah, that's not happening. That's not happening, until we publish their work. Mm-hmm. And they see it in book form, right? So you in essence, for the 8-week workshops, we figured you have to really engage them. And how do you engage them in something that, right? So many of the young people we work with, writing is the last thing they want to do. Besides school, half of them don't want to be in school. Continually I say, how are you doing? And they're like, tired. That's what a young person says to me all the time. But having them engage in this process where it's like, you're going to write a book. right? You're going to write stories. And you can just see for many of them, they're just like, I don't believe this is happening or why this is happening. And so our first couple of weeks of doing a workshop, the first actually 2 to 3 weeks of the workshop, there's actually no writing that happened. We spend our time getting to know the students and getting to understand them and get to know them better. So literally, I think the first workshop will outline the project, but there are moments where we will like give them a set of questions like, okay, you now interview us, you interview the volunteers, you interview the staff. And we have a set of questions, different things that they can ask. And you realize that that for them is them getting to a comfort level of the people in the room. Because right here come these, I jokingly say, here comes this American guy who walks in the classroom and goes, hey, everybody, you're going to write a book. And they're like, what is happening? I literally walked into a classroom in Tulabadi and the kids stared at me for about pretty much the whole first class. Because besides the fact I was also in a cape, I have to admit it. We wear capes all the time with the younger kids. But they are just like, what is happening right now? So you have to get them first past the shock of this is happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Into a comfort level of them being able to just feel like they can be comfortable in a room, right? Because it's school. And what we try to do is make that room, even though the workshop is taking place in school, as least like school as possible. In that room for that hour that we're working with them, it's not typical, and school won't be typical, right? It's going to be, you're going to be asked, what do you think? We're going to, tell you and for many of them, I know we are like, so what do you think of this? Or what do you think of this writing or this thing? And you can see them, because I think many times they're like, you're asking me my opinion. I'm like, yes, you're writing it. I want your opinion. And so it's building that sort of relationship and confidence and trust with them for when they start to put stuff on paper, when they start to write, when they start to put whatever they do on paper, they feel comfortable enough to do that, right? Blank page is hard for anybody, right? Adults, children. I think any author will tell you the hardest thing about writing is you have a blank page staring in front of you and you're supposed to just start putting things down there. And if you're 11 and 12 or 14, that's even harder to do, right? And that there's an end point to what we do, but that they are really given the freedom to create what they do, what they're going to, what they're going to write. There's not really, I think if you look at one of our work plans for a workshop, there might be 2 pages and literally everything is packed into there's a description of the work that's going to happen. And then literally it's week 2 or week 3, write. Week 4, write some more, talk to the volunteer. And so it's how do you get them to feel that comfort level of them so that when they get to the end, there's something. And also the freedom of, right, you're still going to work with many people and you're working with a lot of young people who are differently abled, whether through where their skill set is or other issues they might have to do. And so freeing them up to be able to create however they want to. I mean, that's one of the challenges, like, so you're in the class and you do have some students that are like, they're not going to write at all. And so how do you then let them create something that's a story in a way? So we've had kids where I'm like, do you like the kids who like to draw? I'm like, then create a comic strip. And they will put together a comic strip, create a drawing, right? We had one young person that was like, they love songs. So I'm like, create a song, tell the story in a song. So open up that sort of that freedom for them to create in the way that feels right to them, so that the story they're telling is the story they're telling that's authentic to what they do. But that's, I think, even hard for schools. When we go, I think the first school we went to was Leith Academy, and I think for the head teacher at the time, he was like, you just need to, foster aspiration in the kids. But I think it was also very much to them like, what is happening here? Like the first teacher we worked with, I think, was like, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. What's going on here? And it wasn't until we got to the end of the workshop and the book came out, we take everything away and we create the book, that I think she was like, oh, you were serious. Like, she's like, the kids, you were actually serious. There's going to be a book published from all of this. So that process happens. And I always say to everybody, I say this to the volunteers as well, because the volunteers too will be like, what's happening? I don't see it, right? I don't see this coming together. And I always say, you have to trust the process, right? It's writing. You have to trust the process, and then we'll get to where we go. It's just that this is not typical to what I think how people think that people should learn or how people should create, and that you're opening that up to getting things that are very different and very like, you know, the stories are always, and the primary school stories are always the weirdest, wackiest stories because they're so just like you've given them the opportunity to write whatever they want to. And so they will just create stories, sometimes that have somewhat of a not a logical through line, and sometimes it is. I mean, you know, I've read a lot of things that go, yeah, and then it was a dream. So you've read 5 pages of a story, and they're like, it was all a dream, or everything blew up, and you're like, but where'd that character come from? What happened? So I mean, that sort of helping them at least stick to some sort of through line, but also giving them the opportunity to just create what they want to create, and that there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
Right? That there's nothing that's wrong with what they write. If it's weird, if everything blows up, that's okay. That's where you want the story to go. That's where you want the story to go.
Yeah, I know we mentioned a few of those things before about things around trusting the process. You know, how do you get people to trust the process? And I suppose that's in relation to the Remembering Together project. I assume some of the people wouldn't have worked in a co-creation model before.
Yeah.
It's new to some people, and not all the outcomes are going to be the same because there is no right or wrong way of doing things. So in relation to your own projects, you've obviously got your own model that you work to, but how do you build that confidence in people to keep going? And what does it mean to them when they actually get to the end? You know, why is it important that they publish books?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of there's a lot. I won't say it's in my mind. At the first thought was like there's a lot of hand holding, but there is some hand holding. But there's a lot of, I think it's one of the things that we make sure and we have our volunteers do, and we tell them is to compliment the kids, right? Or to talk about if you're reading it, right? Since there's no wrong answer or something, right? For many of these kids, it's a struggle to put a sentence on a piece of paper, or it's a set paragraphs or whatever. I had one young man, he said, "Can I just write one long paragraph?" And literally, he wrote me a 3-page paragraph, and we're done. And I was like, "That's great." Because it actually was. It just then we edited at the end of it. But it was that sort of being able to give people assurance and confidence along the way. So right, that the process is going and that you're not exasperated. I think with the people who every now and then we get a volunteer who's like, I can't do this, primarily because the process involves, it's not rigid. It's not stuck in one way. Like, right, we might get to week 5 and a young person has written nothing. And people go, well, what do we do about this? I was like, we just keep going, right? And at some point, you know, and you can coax them into creating something. And usually it's that sort of thing. Like we don't put we start out telling people there's a word limit, but there's really no word limit. Right. So sometimes if you can get to me, I'm like, if we get a paragraph out of her, that's awesome. If we get a paragraph out of them, that's great. If I get, and I have gotten 10 to 20 pages from a young person who just becomes inspired to write, but it's through that sort of freedom and that sort of really being able to pay attention, compliment them, make them feel like whatever they write is important and is special, and it's all different. And then continuing to do that through the process of it, I think really does help. So when you get to the end, they're like, okay, great, right? Or you get to the end, and at times we get to the end of the workshop and we're like, okay, we're leaving. 8 weeks is up, we're done. And you see the kids are like, what do you mean we're done? Like we come into the class and we started the first part, and I would say, you know, teenagers, you sit there and they're like 14-year-olds, they're like, this is the last place I want to be. And by 8 weeks later, they're like, what do you mean you're all leaving? What do you mean we're done? I'm like, we're done, right? Because I think if you make this process and you let them have some ownership of the process and some ownership of their work, as I said, there's a freedom that they create what they want to create. Even if there is a prompt or sort of like, you know, we just did a workshop asking the young people about revisionist history. So you revise history however you want to. And they got to pick certain topics and things. But that freedom of it, they're like, well, what should I pick? I'm like, you pick whatever you want to pick. and we can help guide you somewhat, but it's going to be whatever comes out on the page is what comes out on the page. And it was by the end, some of them were like, oh, we're done, or I'm still writing, or I'm still creating. And then some of them were like, I'm done. And that's okay. Right. And I think that's that sort of, that every part of this process, everything, however it comes out, is okay. I think it's the term, but whatever happens is exactly what should have happened.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to have, and sort of for us, for the volunteers, for the staff, that's the freedom of it, of like telling people whatever happens is what's going to happen. It's not bad. It's not, there's no bad in this. It is just what it is.
Yeah, that's very insightful. That leads me on to the next thing about you're asking people to share stories, and I imagine with young people, they're sharing things that, although that you mentioned dreams and an imaginary world, but I imagine sometimes real life experiences come into it, and I suppose I'm relating it to the Remembering Together project again, where I assume a lot of people are going to be eager to share the experiences of COVID and perhaps the trauma that some of them have been through. So how do you get people to tell stories without actually reliving the trauma or maybe the challenges that they're experiencing at that time or have done in the past? How do you manage those two things together?
I think we've done it in a couple ways. We've done it in a couple ways. I think one is that we try not to have the person relive it, right? If it's trauma or if it's something bad. So we come at it depending on the prompt. We're like, well, how would you approach this? Or maybe you want to tell it as a story. Maybe you want to tell it as a story from someone else's point of view. Maybe you want to make it a whole creative writing story and make it up or sort of embellish as you go along. So it's less about an actual event and more about something else that frees them up to it. The other thing is we've done it where it's like we'll have them either. So one of the things I've noticed, and this is with young people, is that we'll do a project. We do a project. We just done one. Was called I Am, and so asking people to talk about who they are. And the thing that was, and is always striking to me, and this is a very cultural difference between Americans and Scottish people, is that Americans will tell you about themselves like that, right? We're notorious for like, you tell, who am I? I'm this person. The kids ask me in the class, they're like, well, could you, we'd ask them like, well, tell us 5 things that are unique about you. And they're like, well, there's nothing that's unique about me. And I was like, well, of course there is stuff that you need, right? So it's sort of like you're coaxing these things out of them. And they're like, well, could you list them? And I was like, 5 things. And I listed 5 things. And they all sat there looking, even the volunteers were looking at me in astonishment, like, how'd you do that? I'm like, it's almost bred into us as Americans to do that sort of thing. So getting young people to do that, it's a hard thing, right? Because I think for many of them, they're like, there's nothing unique about me. But then you have to sort of start to ask questions. And we start to sort of like, well, tell us about what you like to do. Tell us about who you are. And I remember talking to one young woman who she said, there's nothing unique about me. And I was like, okay, great. I was like, well, yeah, there must be. So, we talked a bit more. So what's your interest? She said, well, I like to dance. And I said, well, that's great. Well, how long have you been dancing for? She said, and at the time, she was 15, I think. She's like, I've been dancing since I was 3. I'm like, you've been dancing since you're 3? That's amazing. Like, what type of dance? And she's talking about it. And she's like, oh, and then suddenly she's like, well, we've won a couple of championships. We actually won the Scottish championship for something. I was like, how do you not think that's amazing and unique? And so getting them to sort of understand unique does not mean make you better. Unique makes you different, and different is okay. Right. And I think there is that with young people, they don't want to be different, right? They want to be like everybody else. So you're getting them that comfort level of that uniqueness is okay. And that uniqueness is helpful to you. And we couch it in, and I remember telling them, I said, when you go for a job interview, what makes you stand out from all the other people who are applying for a job? When you're dating, what makes you different from everybody that anyone else could date? What makes you different? And so being able to at least express that and being comfortable in expressing that. And for the people who, there's some of the times those things that are different and unique are painful. And so helping them through that, or helping them at least think through it, and allowing them to either not put that down or put that down, and figuring out a way for them to, if they're going to write about it, right? We do this if it's something that's really sort of like painful that we shouldn't be public. We will talk to them about it. We'll have the teacher and we'll go to the school and have them talk about it, and they'll talk to the kids about it, and we'll flag that just to make sure that it's not something that shouldn't be out there. But we're just definitely I think it's a constant process of making sure that the teachers and the schools know what's happening without breaking confidence, right?
Yeah.
With allowing people, sometimes you just have to put that stuff out there, even though it is, right? The older people, young kids, you just have to put it out there. So allowing them to put that out there. And sometimes it'll be, and we've had one or two pieces where like they put it out and they're like, I don't want to publish it. And I'm like, okay, we won't. And we don't. And
I like the fact there's no pressure on anyone to conform to a certain way of working, or I like that. And I also like your bit about uniqueness. You're certainly unique as a charity, because you mentioned the Cape earlier, and if anyone's ever seen the Superpower Agency bus outside the book festival, you know, you're all dressed up in gold capes, you got silly hats on, you know, and I think because you bring that uniqueness into the charity, it allows young people to perhaps open up about their own uniqueness. I really like that approach to it. I'm hoping we can open up to Q&As in a minute, but before so, maybe one final question around enjoying the process and having fun with it. Why is that important, and how do you do that if people are talking about things that are challenging to them, or even the process being challenging? How do you bring that fun into it so people don't feel dragged down by any difficulties, even if it's just people, like you said, you don't necessarily want to write? Okay, you get them to draw a cartoon instead. So what are the different methods of engagement in sort of trying to get that sort of enjoyment out of taking part?
I think it starts with the way, for us at least, the way we begin the workshop, where there's not writing and there's this sort of people getting to know people, the kids getting to know the volunteers getting to know the kids, and that comfort in being able to be like, okay, there's not a right or wrong, there's nothing bad, whatever the outcome is what the outcome is, and that sort of openness. And so we try to make it even the class of everybody, as that we're all in this together, right? And then sometimes you have to set up rules, and so sometimes we set up rules in the class, and we call them agreements. I was like, what can we agree on, right? I think one of the things with the I Am project, we start out, because some people were going to share some things that they might think are silly, and people might laugh at you or what you do. So we set up agreements at the beginning of the workshop, and the agreements were around, you know, that there were no one laughs at anyone else, right? Everyone listens to everybody else, right? One of the big ones for me was like, you step up and you step back. So you step up and you come back about, you know, what it is. And so this sort of that leaving that and that openness, I think, to sharing. I think one of the things we go in, and kids will know I'm very open, and I tell them, if you ask me a question, I'm gonna tell you the truth, and I'm gonna tell you what it is. And so the volunteers are also we ask them, we say, you be as open as you want to be. And I think that openness that the volunteers come to the work helps the kids want to be open, and helps the kids want to feel comfortable about doing that. So that comfort that then is created, and that relationship that's built between the volunteers and the kids, has the kids then say to the volunteers, if there's something they're talking about, to ask advice or to ask guidance or to ask for help. And I think one of the things I think that comes out of our workshops is helping young people learn to ask for help. Yeah. And to ask for, you know, to say, you know, that I don't have to do this on my own. I might need advice. I might need guidance. And so opening that up within the process of sort of for remembering together for this process with COVID, of that you're going to be dealing with a lot of painful things, but other people might have gone through these things as well. So how do we share that? And how do we, once we know everybody in this room has a similar background or is going through some similar stuff, it allows an openness, because you're not doing it on your own, right? In that workshop, when we do those workshops, we're all writing. Everyone, there's no one that's not going to write something. You don't all have to be published, but everyone is taking part of this process, and we're all doing it together. So that by the end, and they're all watching, right? And so when we do it, the classroom in Tulabadi, and I walked in, and it was one of the quietest rooms I'd ever walked into because the kids were all just writing, and they were furiously writing. I walked in, and I was like, and the teacher's like, they've been writing for like 20 minutes before you got here, and they're all like going on about their stories. But I think that they're all in a shared experience, and that shared experience gives them power and gives them comfort in being able to then be, to put stuff out there, silly, smart, or whatever that they put out there, and that's helpful in creating that shared experience.
Oh, that's so powerful. About relating to each other and going on a journey together, and yeah, that's incredible. We've actually got some questions coming through the chat. We've got one from Adila and Kirsten here. So I'm going to open up to questions from everybody. So we'll start with the ones in the chat. I don't know, Kirsten, do you want to just appear, or would you prefer if I just...
Hi, I can't put my camera on, it's been disabled, but yes, I'm Kirsten from Dundee, and we are a UNESCO City of Design, and I just loved, you mentioned about the pop-up books project in your intro, Tam, and I can't remember which of the organisations it was that you've worked with, Gerald, but I'd love to hear more about that project because it reminds me of some of the work that the V&A Dundee have done as well.
So the project was it was with the 4 primary schools that feed into Leith Academy, and they wanted, and the process and the workshop, we call it a transition workshop. So it's really helping. We do it P6s and P7s, primarily with P7s, to help them with their transition to high school. So we work with them, and the stories that they create, what the charge that we gave the students was, or the background for the workshop was, you are traveling to a different planet, which was planet Alba, from your home planet, and now you have to recolonize this new planet. What's it going to be like to go to this new planet? So the work that we did with Lucy was, one, starting out for them creating a spaceship, and sort of what's in the spaceship, what do they need, what does it look like? And so Lucy sort of were bringing their ideas to life and putting that together before they ever started writing. So I think the first 3 workshops were then, the first workshop was talking about the project and setting it up. And then the next 2 workshops were about them creating their spaceships, drawing their spaceships, but also talking to Lucy about what it is. There were a lot of chicken McNugget rooms in the spaceships. So many chicken McNugget rooms. Children love chicken McNuggets and donuts. But was putting that part together. And then what Lucy had created, and Tan said, it was these long pop-up creations that they had created together, she created with the kids. Those then sat in the classroom while they were writing the stories. So you would frequently see the kids coming up, looking at the spaceships, seeing what it is, asking questions about it, and then they go back to writing their story. So this sort of was a living thing with them in the workshop that then remained in this class for the rest of the work, I think for the rest of the year, but allowed them to sort of to bring that to life and the process to life for what they were doing.
It's also just making me think about, we're putting a lot of emphasis on the young people, but artists get so much out of it as well. So the partnership project came about because I deliver on the community engagement program for Learning for Craft Scotland, and I'm always looking for opportunities for craft makers to do artist in residency in partnership with other organisations. And I know a lot of the makers who engage with people like Gerald and his team, it often gives them an opportunity to experiment with their own work. Often craft makers are busy running their own businesses, but they don't get that time or get paid to experiment and work in different ways. And I know a lot of makers like Lucy come out of it so energized and with new ideas for new work, bodies of work that come out of it. But it's also important to work with creative people who, for example, work with schools, have got that sort of natural tendency to want to teach, have got that sort of background and wanted to work with young people and stuff. And Lucy certainly has that. So we're always careful who we match together. But I know Lucy absolutely loved it, and now is a big fan of Superpower Agency since then, and I hadn't heard of you beforehand. Yeah, hopefully, Kirsten, that was everything answered there.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now I know a few people got their hands up, but I'm just going to go to the second question on the chat function with Adil. I don't know if you want to appear or do you want me to just do
Sure, yeah, I can just so hi Gerald, thank you so much for such an amazing I'm just in awe right now. I'm really just super inspired by the work that you're doing. I'm a storytelling associate for Remembering Together program. So just curious to know, do you feel the 8-week process is enough time for the children? Or, for the students, like in that way to sort of understand and to be aware of what they want to achieve out of it?
It's a good question. I think because we started out and the workshops were about 4 or 5 weeks, and we realized that the 4 or 5 weeks wasn't enough time because either they got into and I think the first year or two was us experimenting with length of time for it. And at one point we thought we'd do a 6-week workshop, and then that didn't work because what wound up happening was, to your point, of they got to a point where they were still writing and we had cut them off. And we're like, okay, we can't cut them off, so let's give it another couple weeks. There's a point where they just become, they become bored.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, or they're like, I wrote my story, it's done. I won't do this anymore. So, which is fine for us. And meanwhile, we do have some workshops that last 10 weeks.
Okay.
And we give them a couple more. We've just now finished working on a children's book with a group of 15, 12-year-old boys.
Great.
And they came up with a single story that is this children's book. Didn't come up with that just idea for the story. Took 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then editing and putting it together. And we're having artists are coming in, and artists have created the characters and things and drawn everything. So, but I think that 10 weeks, literally it ended, and you could see that they were like, we're done with this process.
Amazing.
That process was fine. But you get some kids who could write. And I remember we had one class, the young woman kept coming up to me literally every day. Can I have, like 3 times, can I have another piece of paper? Right. Can I have another piece of paper? I was like, what are you writing? By the time she was done, she'd written 15 pages. It's like a 12, she was in P7. It's like a 10-year-old. She's like, I've just got this story in me and it has to come out. And I was like, then you bring that story out and we're going to let you do it. Right. And so we got to the end and she had finished it. So I think as long as they know what the time frame is.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's that piece of it too, that them knowing what the time frame is and how much time they have and what it is. They will give you what they will put out what they can do, and they will give you what you want.
Great.
What you want the end part to be. We had the high school workshop. We just did a guidebook with some kids from Broughton Street from Drummond High School. And we got to week 5 and many of them hadn't written anything. And we were actually, it was one of the first times, and I've been doing this for a while, that I was like, we might not have a book. I'm not sure if we're going to have a book. They are really hesitant to do this. And so I walked in the next week and said, you have 4 weeks. And suddenly they all stopped and looked at me and said, what do you mean we have 4 weeks? I said, you have 4 weeks. Before the book, we're gone and it's done. And they created a book. They did it. They started writing. Many of them stopped talking in the class and they started writing, and they did it. And so that sort of time frame then, and I am not a big deadline person. My own personal life with work, I hate deadlines. So I hate giving people deadlines. But I was realizing, I think for them, there's still a deadline here. I don't care what you write, but you have to be done by this point in time. Yeah. And that's helpful for them.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Gerald. One last question. I'm also curious to know what sort of support is there for the students after the 8 weeks? If they are interested in to take this ahead, is there any sort of support that your organization provides them still to sort of work on their strengths, if that is that they want to take that forward even?
Yeah, we haven't. We hadn't. We're just now starting to start. One of the things we're starting this summer. We're doing piloting a summer school program.
Okay.
So for those young people that are interested, that might be interested more in writing, we're starting to do that because I think we hadn't before.
Mm.
I think we hadn't had the capacity really before. One of the things I think we had come to, we'd wanted to open up an actual youth writing center, which you still will probably do, where the kids who are, to your point, of the ones who really want to keep writing, they could come to it. We just hadn't. We started looking for a space, and then we got to the pandemic, and then we stopped.
Okay.
One of the things for us is thinking about where could we create a space for them, for the ones who want to continue to write, will come to write. We had right before also, we'd done an after school, besides being in school during the school day, we started an after school program with one school, with Leith Academy, and we had maybe about 10 kids come who had been in all the workshops, and that actually, they created a magazine, a comedy magazine for that. So we're trying to think of more ways to sort of how do we continue to engage those, because to your point, you have those kids, out of the 25 of them, 3 of them will be like, I want to continue.
Yeah.
What do I do? And so we talk to the teachers about pointing them in directions of things they can do, but we'd like to create something and a space for them to be able to come to and be able to work on their writing. So that's hopefully coming in the next year or 2.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Kim, I can see you've got your hand up. Are you wanting to?
Hi.
Jump in?
Burning questions, many burning questions. I won't ask all of them because we will be here all day. I just wanted to, first of all, reflect some of the things back that I've heard you talking about that really resonate for me in terms of the Remembering Together programme, and this idea of trusting the process, the power of metaphor, and being able to kind of cite experiences in a different way in order to reflect on them, individual uniqueness and shared experience, and that they have a place together, the power of questions, and also this idea of honesty. Like honest is one of our values on the programme. So those spaces for people to share what it is that they really need or want to share is going to be a big part of our work. But what the question that's really burning for me actually is thinking about, you have artists and yourselves supporting young people to do this work. How do you support each other? And what do you need from your partners, from your clients, from your funders, from the people that ask you to do this work in order to do it really well?
That's He's asked a $1 million question. $1 million question. One of the things I think is, I think people there. So, in terms of funders, I think there's a form of people being very outcome driven. Like there has to be something that ends. There has to be something, right? And then you have to then measure it and you have to evaluate it. And I'm all for evaluation. I'm all for this. But some of the stuff that we do is unmeasurable. Right? You can't measure this confidence that young people are getting in their writing and once they've finished the project and they've seen that book, and that book is something that they will keep. Right? As I said, with the project we just did with the Pen Pals project, the kids all had a copy of the book, and some of them were coming up, but can I have another copy? And so we give them another copy of the book. But it was that they're like, I want to give this copy to my mom. I can't measure that. Right? And so the freedom that there are certain things that will not be measurable in what comes out of what we do, right? So that sort of understanding of that. I always want, at least for me, for the funders, like come in and actually volunteer. And we have had 1 or 2 funders will come in and actually volunteer and actually come in and do the workshop and participate. And you can see that they're like, I see what you're doing now and I see what's happening. And so that seeing sort of like being like, I can put this in a grant proposal, but that grant proposal is not going to really put everything. The story I tell in that grant proposal is still not going to tell you everything that happens in that classroom. So being able for funders and people to come and see what we do and to see it, firsthand and experience it, and then work with the young people, right? I think it's interesting, and I think this Pen Pals project, I keep coming back to it, not just because we're done, but so many things came out of it, and one of them was this connection between the kids and the adults, and the fact that there is that, that the kids are scared of, not scared of adults, but the kids don't know how to relate to the adults, and the adults don't know how to relate to the kids. And so you put them in this letter writing thing where they're letter writing, and they hadn't met at all. They hadn't seen each other. So they're writing these letters back and forth and realizing how much they actually had in common and how much they actually sort of like, you know, and kids like, oh, I like this book. Oh, I like this book too. I was reading this book when I was young, or I want to be a writer, or I want to do this. And so when they all met in person, you could see the kids actually right before the teacher's like, the kids are really afraid they're not going to know what to, they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. They're really nervous about meeting up with their pen pals. And the meetup lasted 2 hours and could have gone on for another hour or two, because they then were just talking to each other and just connecting to each other because they already had a point of reference for each other. And then just sort of like you could see, and then pen pals coming up to me going, well, how do I continue to talk to the kids? Or like, we're talking about this. And so we're figuring out as the go-between of them still connecting to each other. But there's a point I walked up to one group of pen pals and I said, do you need anything? And they both looked at me like, get away, we're talking. So I was like, oh, okay. So that piece of it, that connection piece of it. And then I think that for us, for the volunteers and the artists that we work with, we tell our volunteers there's no set time frame for how much time as you volunteer with us. So it's not like you might, some organizations, they might say, you have to volunteer with us for 10 hours. We're like, you give us what you can. So if it's an hour a week, that's great. If it's an hour a month, we'll take it, right? And we've got a dedicated volunteer coordinator that in essence is there to respond to the volunteers, to respond to the artists that we work with, to be able to, I always like to say, the care and feeding of those people, right? And we do a lot of appreciation events for those people. We have a volunteer appreciation party coming up on June 1 to just be like, thank you. We had a Christmas party in the middle of all of this COVID madness, but when we sort of opened up, we had a Christmas party and had about 20 or so of our volunteers show up, and we're sending them drinks and food, and we're like, this is just thank you. This is just an opportunity for us to thank you for coming into classrooms in the midst of all of this, but also all this time and sticking with us all this time. And that appreciation, I think, goes a long way of appreciating the process that these people, the time, the energy, and the effort that the people put into it, right? And the amount of connection, because many of the volunteers will say they get so much more out of it, they think, than the kids do. That's a routine thing I hear from volunteers. I think I got much more out of this than the kids did. And I'm like, you'd be surprised, the kids got a lot out of it. But that sort of being able to appreciate and continue to appreciate the volunteers for the work that they're putting in and what they're doing. And for the artists we work with, I think to what Lucy was, when Lucy worked with us, we sort of were like, I was up front, I said, so you're working with kids. They might be crazy. Right? I don't know how still they're going to be with this or how much they're going to engage. And don't think of that as a reflection on you. It's other things going on, other things that day, but just take it, come in once. I think Lucy came into the class twice and just be able to, and just be open to it. And it's back to the process of the openness of that some of the kids are going to engage, some of them aren't. That's okay, right? And just sort of create what you do. And we've had other artists come in and they will work with the kids. For 7 Spaceships, the other thing we did, we had artists create the actual drawings of the spaceships once all the stories were done. And so we gave all the stories to the artists and we were just like, design away. You do what you feel. They're like, well, do I have any parameters? I'm like, if you need them, I could give them to you, but I'd rather not, because I'd rather you just create what you think it is going to be. And we took the spaceships back to the kids and they were like, and I think that was the thing I think that for the artists, they loved, that the kids were like, you brought our ideas to actual life. You did the children's book we're working with now. The artists have been, during the 10 weeks, we've been able to sort of give the kids, we asked the kids to write briefs for the artists, for the characters they were creating. And we saved those, sent those to the artists, and the artists came back with their first renditions of drawings, and we sent them to the kids. And I said, some of the things the kids are going to point to are not things that you would, they're tough critics, right? Some things they point to, they're like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like this. I said, that's okay. Just go with it. And so that was helpful for them, I think, that back and forth between and the iteration and the being okay with the kids being critical, or anybody, adults. I think people are going to be critical of it, and that's okay. Right? It's just sort of, you get to a point of the end process and the end drawings, but the kids were just excited that someone took their ideas and brought them to life. And that to me was that I had literally 15, 12-year-old boys sitting there in awe of what was being shown to them. Was great.
I think what I'm really taking from that response as well, Gerald, is something that we've kind of, I guess, set out as one of the reasons why we're doing co-creation, which is that we can cope with and support each other through things that can be challenging, especially if we do it together. And there's that mutuality of valuing the different perspectives in the room, in the conversation, and whatever the setting is that you're doing that. So yeah, just echo what everyone else has said about how great it is to hear you talking about the Superpower Agency.
Thank you.
I'm letting Tanwin come back now.
I just wonder, what people like to do now. Has anyone got any more questions for Gerald, or would you like to go into a short breakout room session so you get a chance to talk amongst each other, meet each other? Because I know this is the first sharing space event. So I don't know if you want to put in the chat, perhaps what your preference is. So if we do the breakout room, it'll just be for 10 minutes and then 5 minutes of feedback at the end before we finish in 15 minutes. No, we've got nothing in the chat, so I think maybe we just do breakout rooms and give Gerald a break as well. So Emma's saying that's great. Okay, so Carla, who's working on the team, will put you all into your groups now, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes.
Hang on, did Gerald have something for us to think about as well?
So, yes. I don't know if you remember what the question, Gerald, but it was, what is your aha moment from listening to you talk today about the Superpower Agency?
That was my question, right?
Yeah. So it's up to you in your breakout room if you'd like to discuss that. What stood out for you today from the conversation, or if you don't feel like you want to do that, it's just an opportunity for you to have a general chat and talk amongst each other.
Cool. Rooms are opening, so it should be moved very soon.
Thanks, Carla.
It's everyone's favourite moment while Teams decides what it's doing.
I know.
I didn't assign any of us because I'm not sure what do we just.
I think we let them just have their chats. Hi, Lisa. Can we pop Lisa into a room?
Yeah, I think she dropped out, and I'm gonna try and move you, Lisa. Just a second.
Yeah, I just disappeared and had to rejoin.
Good old Teams.
You are assigned, which is weird. So I'm not sure.
Well, I couldn't use the chat or anything.
Are you on your phone?
No, I'm on my laptop.
Sometimes the phone doesn't allow breakout rooms. Let me try again.
I don't know if you've ever used breakout rooms on Zoom, but I've found it's a revelation in comparison to Teams. So much easier. Yeah, Gerald's nodding in agreement.
So much easier.
It is. Our main problem is a lot of our council partners just cannot access it. It's very, very frustrating for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Well, I think Ollie got kicked out as well there.
Yes, something went wrong.
Assigned you and Ollie to.
Emma's gone as well. Hello, you got kicked out. So did we. So maybe those that have been kicked out and are rejoining, you can be a breakout group here. And I will close my Tanman and Carla and John and I can close our cameras and mics and just let you.
Yeah, I don't know about all of you, but I just had a blank screen. It didn't look like I'd been put into a room.
Yeah, I had the same thing, Emma. Yeah,
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah, I just pressed my back button and kind of came back into the main space because it was just, and I don't know whether that was because our mics and cameras were off. So I started having a conversation by myself.
Ah.
So
it's nice to meet you.
Yes,
TeamSpeak,
hello.
I've heard of you. You're Glasgow way, yes?
That's right. Yeah. So working for TeamSpeak and supporting the Glasgow partnership. So all very exciting. We've just, just kind of had a little look through our briefs. So we're just kind of at that stage, really, right at the beginning. So how about you two?
I'm at the beginning. I'm a freelancer and I work with lots of sort of creative organisations, sort of from a community development perspective. So we've just come in the Scottish borders. So my own background is using the creative industries as a tool of engagement with young people. So probably I can relate to what you're doing at TuneSpeak, because yours is sort of drama based, isn't it?
It's not. No.
Is it not?
No.
I
mean, our organisation is young people and theatre specific, but I'm involved in 2 national projects at the moment for them, which is the Cultural Collective programme and the Remembering Together programme. And those are mixed art form and across all ages and stages. So slightly different from what they normally do. And how about you, Ollie? Where are you based?
Yeah, so I'm through in West Dunbartonshire. So I'm the pastor of Rock Community Church. So my background's community arts though. So we're the kind of lead partner for phase 1. So we're just at the